Yep. I'm a teapot. Is that real? I'm a teapot. That's what it tells me. The server refuses to brew coffee because it is a teapot. It's a reference of hypertext coffee pot control protocol, which was an April Fool's joke in 1998. Perfect. I think that's a bonus. What's Shane Young doing on here? No Tampa and the Fort Lauderdale? Cool.
That. Okay. Changing something else here. And then it'll take XSplit 60 seconds to save that change.
I'm just checking to see if anything crazy and political has happened. We could talk about that stuff.
Shane and I have joked a lot that we would love to do like a Todd and Shane After Dark podcast, where we could talk about all those things. Both of our wives are certain to be the death of our careers.
Have you seen that the new Gillette commercial everybody's all upset about?
No, but I've heard that everybody's all upset about it.
Yeah, I feel like I ought to
this won't even be.
And I use an electric shaver, so do I not have to be a cool dude?
So many things to be upset about. Like my hair, for instance, I'm like 2 days away from a haircut. My hair is all over. It's just I should wear a hat. Or maybe just do that. Okay. So you got, Brett's got me, Mark's got something. Yeah, sadly it looks better than my hair does.
Looks like a fried egg on your head.
Yes, well, you know.
Which is sort of normal.
Depends on the day, depends on the night before. Okay, so is the sound good? Can we go forth and podcast? I guess I could wear. No, so I go to a female hairstylist who does female hair mostly, and women get haircuts less frequently than guys do, and so I just get. Really? Well, guys that get haircuts, so you excluded, of course. But we get haircuts more frequently than women do, so she's always like, so, 6 weeks? And I'm like, how about 4? She's like, can we meet in the middle at 5? So then I end up with this mess because this. When I was in high school, I had a school teacher who was I had many school teachers that were kind of jerks, but one of them, and he never said this to me, which is kind of ironic, not ironic, but just unexpected, but he liked to refer to kids as having Audubon hair, as in it ought to been on a dog. And I feel like that's where I'm at right now. I've got Audubon hair.
Maybe you should just go for the full shave,
I was in the Army, I've done it.
You got a nicely shaped melon, you could.
Thanks for
noticing. Pull it.
I appreciate that. No, I did, and so when this is far too much information, but when Jill and I started dating, I was still in the Army, and my previous girlfriend did my haircuts because my hair was super short. It was shaved on the side, a little guard on the top, super short hair. Really easy to do. And I could do it myself, but it was just seeing everything like I had to have mirrors. So yeah. She did it. It was super easy. And so when Jill and I started dating, I explained to her that one of her many girlfriend duties was haircuts. And she was not on board with that. And I told her, I'm like, it's no big deal. If you screw up, I just shave it. And 2 weeks later, it's fine. Like, there's no stress here. But she could not. I mean, it was just out of her comfort zone. And we didn't do that. So now I have to. But yeah, when I was in the Army, short hair.
Well, so when you're in the Army, they just sort of come over and buzz you off, right? I mean,
depends on where in your Army career you are. So when you first get there and you're in basic training and all that, yeah, they line everybody up, they shave you to the skin, and that's just how you stay. Once you get out of training and get to your job and you're not a turd anymore, then you can have it out a little longer. But it can't touch your ears and it can't, there's all this stuff, but you can actually have something on hair.
But do they offer a regular head shave or?
You have to pay for it. They have barbers on post.
So you only get that one freebie then?
You get freebies for like the first. Well, I don't even think they're free. I think you have to pay for them in your basic training. But yeah, they shave your head.
When you're all lined up in that room in your underwear with the indignity and they make you pay for it?
Well, there's much indignity. So the first one might be free, but like you're in basic training for 10 weeks, 8 weeks, and then whatever your job school is after that. So mine was another 12 weeks. So for that period, you're not all standing in your underwear getting haircuts. So I forget. It was.
You put the negative stuff out of your mind.
Yeah. And so it's funny. So Mark Chrisman in the chat room, he was in the Army too. The first one is funny because you got these kids that are all from everywhere, and they got hair, all things. And then they like you said, they just line you up in your underwear. They sit you in a chair. They take a big stripe right down the middle, so you're committed. And they shave your head and then they kick you out. And it's like 30 or 40 guys standing outside just touching their hair with this look on their face. They've never like, oh my God, it is all gone. Oh my God. And everybody, as far as you can see, we're all doing this. Oh.
That's the first thing you learn in the Army, how to touch your own head.
It was pretty funny. All right, so let's go ahead and get this thing started. We've got notes. Lori, I assume, is ready because she is always more ready than we are. Let me move some windows around. So
what's Lori doing? Does she run this thing?
She keeps track of the times and puts the times in the notes and things like that.
That's pretty useful. Thanks, Lori.
She is, yes, she is very useful. We miss her when she's gone. Okay, Lori, we're doing the thing, putting my marker in the video.
You went all out of focus when you did that.
Yes, I can't shut that off. I don't know how to shut that off. 3, 2. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Todd and Shane's Cloudy Podcast, episode 418, recorded live Wednesday, January 16th, 2019. Those of you that are on the video screen and enjoy my complete and total lack of a haircut will also notice that it's not Shane joining me this week. Instead, it's Mark. Oh, I pointed the wrong way. It's Mark. Mark, introduce yourself to the listeners and the viewers.
Hey, it's Mark Anderson. I like to think of myself as a friend of Shane and Todd's, but
yeah, I like you more than I like Shane. So yeah,
sort of comes and goes, you know.
Yeah, so Shane is out gallivanting across Florida, spreading the good word about Flow and Power Apps and who knows what else. So I asked Mark to step in for me, and he graciously agreed to do that. So I appreciate you coming on board.
Well, you know how we are at Simpraxis. Most of the time we're just sitting around on our thumbs. So, you know, when something like this comes up.
Usually, yeah, we're in Teams trying to figure out how to use Teams so that we can send each other jokes back and forth. And man, so it's funny. So I'm the only Simpraxian or Simpraxite or whatever the demonym is for us that is in the central time zone. So I'm an hour behind all of the other folks. And this morning, like right after 8, you guys had your coffee. You guys started chatting in Teams. I was still laying in bed, and my phone, I have Teams not set to do any kind of alerting on my phone. But my watch gets alerts. So every time the silent alert would show up, my watch would vibrate. But my watch wasn't in the room. My watch was in the bathroom where my wife was. And she's like, what the hell is going on? Your watch is freaking out. And I had no idea because I wasn't looking at my phone. And I'm like, oh, those crazy East Coasters chatting.
Well, and Julie's in her own time zone because she's up at like 5 in the morning. So, you know, it's like it's almost like she's in Europe.
Our European office right there in Hampshire, yeah. So that was fun stuff. So Mark, one of the things that Shane and I noticed far too late is that our episode numbers match up with HTTP codes.
Oh yeah,
and so we've had a lot of fun with that. Last week's HTTP code appropriately was expectation failed, which I think ought to be the name of this podcast if I had to rename it.
Actually, that's sort of fitting, isn't it?
Failed expectations.
But I think this week's is a little better.
I like this week's, and it was funny. So go ahead and tell them what HTTP code 418 is.
Well, it's your show, dude. You can go ahead. All right, I'll do it. HTTP 418 is, of course, I'm a teapot.
Of course.
Because everyone was going to guess that.
Right. How could we run web servers and web clients and have them have any sort of communication without them being able to communicate succinctly? I'm a teapot. Yes,
of course, the important thing about the "I'm a teapot" message is that it actually lets you know that the server refuses to brew coffee because it's a teapot.
Right.
So if you ask that server for coffee, you're going to get a 418 back.
Yeah. And so the funny thing about that particular code, other than the code itself, is funny in and of itself. We were trying to get the audio and the video set up beforehand. And Mark and I are on Skype, so we can hear each other, but the crowd can't hear us. Chat room can't hear us. And so I tell Mark, hey, while I'm trying to figure this out, go look up HTTP code 418. So I'm clicking the things, and Mark says to me, I'm a teapot. And so I'm like, well, you know, I'll play along, Mark. Are you short? Are you stout? And it's like an episode of Three's Company. We're talking.
I didn't understand what you were saying. You didn't understand what I was saying. So it's pretty much a par for the course kind of thing, really.
It was, it was awesome. So that's great fun with the 418 HTTP. That's awesome. And I remember back in the day seeing things like the webcams on the coffee pots, and so I think that's probably comes out of that. But that was fun.
It's been around since 1998.
Yeah. So I was on the internet in '98. That was
yeah.
That's good stuff. So that maybe that'll be this week's episode title. I'm a teapot. So for production notes, everything's going smooth. I got last week's out early, and we have to say nice things about the folks at SysKit because they are friends of ours. I do some work for them. I help them with products and marketing and all that. I just got an email from them a couple days ago we're starting off. We've got some big plans for what they're going to do product-wise this year. So keep an eye out on that. I'll probably be blogging some of that. I'm going to be writing some stuff for their blog, and it's
and they're just swell folks.
They are the best. So I got to go hang out with them last month in Croatia, and that was something they had been asking me to do, to come over and spend a couple days with them and help them with some product design and things like that. And they started asking like in June or July of last year, and I kept being busy and kept putting it off. Didn't get over until December. And man, was I kicking myself, because they got a great office and they're great people, and Zagreb's a great city. And I'm like, why did I not do this 6 months ago?
I miss Zagreb. Yeah. When they moved the conference from Zagreb up to Germany, I mean, Germany's cool.
Yeah.
But I like going to Zagreb.
Yeah, and I was there in Zagreb during Christmas, so I was there like the first weekend of December. And they do this thing where essentially the entire old city part of Zagreb becomes a big Christmas fair. And it was, like, they didn't have to do all that for me. I'm a nobody, but they really decked the town out.
This was the only year that actually happened, I think.
And I Todd's
appreciate coming. It. Todd's coming.
Quick, everybody, hang up 1 million lights and have 10,000 food vendors.
If anyone could, let us know how we say Todd's coming in Croatian, I think that would be a bonus.
Yeah. So I haven't told you the story. I think I told it on the podcast after I got back, but Zagreb's a big city. I don't know how big, but I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah, definitely. Big. And so Tony Francola was taking me around on a Friday night to this big thing. And this thing, it's in the entire old city. I mean, it is massive, the length and breadth of this thing. And we kept running into friends of his everywhere. Like, this happened like 10 times. I'm not exaggerating. One of the times we ran into friends of his one of them was a buddy of his from college, and his wife and their son, and their son's like 5. So the buddy and his wife were chatting with the kid in Croatian. Tony sees him. He walks over, says some stuff in Croatian, introduces me in Croatian. Then they switch to English so that I can understand what they're saying. As soon as they switch to English, the 5-year-old kid starts getting mad because now he can't understand it. And so he asks the dad, why are you speaking in this devil tongue? Why are you not speaking in Croatian? And the dad says to the kid, well, Tony's friend here doesn't speak Croatian. And so we switched to English so he can understand. And the kid has never met anybody that doesn't speak Croatian. Like, he can't. And so the rest of the night, as he followed us around, he kept trying to trick me into talking to him in Croatian. Because it just was so crazy to him that any adult who could, like, tie his shoes and feed himself couldn't speak Croatian.
What's wrong with this guy?
It's like he thought I was a little slow. Can't even speak Croatian.
So when you got back, did you try to teach Owen some Croatian so that when this wouldn't happen to him?
No, I'm still trying to teach him to not stand on the table and not to throw trucks at his sister.
You may well have Croatians come and visit you in Iowa. That could happen anytime because Croatians love Iowa.
They do, and there's a lot to love, but they all speak English, so it will.
True. So that whole never mind. That all falls down. All right.
Yeah. It was that little kid, and he had the same. He was the same age as Owen, same general 5-year-old little boy energy and lack of respect for authority. And it was a lot of fun.
Fascination with authority.
So on to the topic. So the first thing, this is the final week of the birthday charity drive. Those of you that have been listening to the podcast at all in the last 10 years know all about this. The month between Lori's birthday and my birthday, we have a charity drive. We don't ask you to give to us. We don't even ask you to give to our charities of choice. We don't even care. All we ask is that if you've got a little left over, think about giving it to a charity of your choice, whatever's important to you, and then come brag to Lori and I about how generous you are. Just talk yourself up a little bit. Tell us what a great person you are. And then at the end of the month, we'll tally up the amount of all the charity that's been given out, clap for ourselves, pat each other on the back. And in previous years, I have agreed to match whatever charitable donations the viewers have done. Then they started getting into the thousands of dollars, and I sort of ratcheted that back for a couple of years. Yes, so Brett in the chat room has the hashtag Bankrupt Todd for charity. I think that is a noble thing.
Excellent.
And so this year, before the numbers got where they are at, I talked to the lovely Mrs. Clint, and we agreed that we will match the funds again this year. And at last count, Lori updated it right before the podcast. We're a little over $5,000, so $5,200, something like that. So kudos to all of you out there. You've got like 3 days or so to get those in, and I'll talk about that next week.
What kind of charity? What charities do you hear people donating to, or do you not ask that question?
Well, I don't ask. So Lori, so this was Lori and Dan Usher's idea 10 years ago, and Lori has kept the torch going on that. So she asks that question. There's a website. You can go to lorigowan.com and click in there. And it's in there, and it's all kinds of great stuff. St. Jude's and various, medical things, cancer funds and Red Cross, and it's all out there. It's amazing stuff. And I guess one of the things about charities is we all have our pet things. And, so I've got 4 or 5 charities that my wife and I give to every year. We just kind of you get blinders. So it is interesting to see what other things are out there. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a pretty worthy cause too.
So can I give a bunch of money to charity at the end of the year, and I could claim that and help bankrupt you.
If it happened between December 19th and
you could be in trouble here. Yeah. What if it was like, I don't know, say the 40th anniversary of my graduating from high school, and so I gave them a whole bunch of money?
I would hope that's not the case. I could end up regretting it.
Because it actually is, but
Because it actually is, and I actually did.
I'll be discreet about this.
Yes. So no, it's great. And then and Lori also has people. She gets a birthday card, and they all sign it. So I've got a stack of birthday cards. I've still got the last couple on my desk here. The people who did it signed it, put with their.
That's really cool. I didn't know you guys did this.
We've done every year since the first year of the podcast. Yeah.
And luckily, it's on SharePoint 2010, so we know it's reliable.
Yes. Yeah. We've been doing this for 10 years, and ironically, it's on the exact same platform today that it was the first day that we launched it.
Hey, it worked then. It works now, right? I mean,
what's broke? Don't fix it. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's awesome. That's totally awesome.
Yeah, and the thing about that, so that was not my idea. So we started the podcast in March of 2019 or 2009, and then that December, that was all Lori and Dan's idea. They were all like, "Hey, you," and then that was one of the things. And I don't do it much now, but if you remember 2009, kind of a rough time, and so early in the podcast, I was like, "Hey, there's a lot of people that are needing some help right now, and if you have the opportunity to help some folks, now's a good time to do it because there's a lot of people out there that can benefit from that." And so then when my birthday came around, they're like, "Hey, let's make this official. Let's put pen to paper. Let's ask people to do this." And no, that was great. So Dan and Lori get all the credit for it. It was a great idea. Mark is asking in the chat room, yes, but didn't you have to rebuild the farm once or twice? I think, Mark, in the time that I have hosted my blog and Lori's thing right now on SharePoint 2010, without exaggeration, I have probably had to rebuild that 7 or 8 times from different moving hosting providers or hosting providers deleting my stuff or it just, patching it to death. Yeah, so it's been quite a few. One of the things that Mark and Lori always yell at me about, and I'm honestly a little surprised that Mark hasn't brought it up yet, is to move my blog to WordPress, which apparently is an okay blogging platform.
I wasn't going to, I admire you for your tenacity on this one. I'm not.
Tenacity, stupidity, they could go. But for another project I'm doing outside of work, I'm using WordPress for a couple of things. And I've got like a list of reasons why I can't move my blog to WordPress. And as I've been playing with WordPress, I've been winnowing that list down. I've started figuring some things out. So I'm not saying I'm in the process of moving my blog to WordPress, but it is more likely now than it has ever been.
I don't think it's going to be that hard retyping all that stuff.
You don't think so? I've only got like 800 and some blog posts and tens of thousands of comments.
I mean, in your spare time, we're at Sympraxis. Again, I want to point out we're sort of a different culture. We encourage people to retype their blogs every couple of years, really. And so you haven't done it. You haven't done it in a decade. So
I have not. No, I did. So this was one. I don't remember if you remember this. There was several years ago. Call it 5 years ago. I had my blog hosted at a place, and I don't want to throw shade on anybody, so I won't say what it was. And they deleted my VM, like it just went away.
Oh.
And I had been assured that so I had been backing up my databases to the VM in case SharePoint or SQL crapped itself. I would have the databases locally. And then I was assured by the hosting provider that there were backups of the VM somewhere. So I thought I was covered. And then the VM went away, and I went, wow, that really sucks, but it's a good thing we have those backups of the VM, right? And the person went, oh, yeah, about that. So there were no backups of my blog for 7 months, something like that. And so what I ended up doing, so I had a backup from when I moved it over there. I applied that, and then I absolutely reposted all of the blog posts that I had posted in that 7-month period. And I had all of the alerts from SharePoint of the comments that people had left. I pasted those all back in as well. It took me like a month to get it back up to speed.
Wow, that's dedication, man.
It was, and I think it was only the pure fury and hatred of that situation that allowed me to power through and do it.
And somehow this is all tied up in giving money to charity and doing good in the world. So, again, I admire you for this.
So, but hopefully we'll be able to make that go to a better platform, WordPress or something, and to get that. Enough about that. I need to talk about happier things. So
I think everybody who's watching this is sort of sitting there going, why are we here, Todd?
This is like a therapy session. All the things that have hurt me.
That's the thing. At the end, if you feel better, then it's been a successful podcast.
Yeah, and it's for Shane and I. It's really about whether we amuse ourselves and entertain ourselves. That's really the real purpose. But there have been some things that have gone on in the SharePoint world in the last week. It's been a busy week looking at things. And so Shane and I travel in similar circles. He does more Power Apps and Flow, obviously, than I do, but we have a lot of the same interests. Mark is a developer, so he brings a completely different set of things in. So I thought there was a bunch of stuff for me to talk about. And then Mark
travel in hexagons.
Yeah, exactly. I travel in circles. Yes, So the first thing that I wanted to mention, and Mark and I both put this in the notes, so you know it's important, is that Microsoft is going to be removing the ability to, at the tenant level, stick to the classic list and library interface. So there's a lot of nooks and crannies in that whole thing. So several months, a year ago, whatever, Microsoft rolled out the modern lists and libraries, which look different, obviously, and have different functionality. But they allowed you to set at the tenant level a setting that says everything's going to be classic. So you had some time to train your users and figure out processes and things like that. And starting April 1st, this is no joke, that tenant level switch goes away. So now if you want to keep your list and libraries at the classic level, you have to do it at the list level, kind of slowly weaning us off of those.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think people who set that switch at the tenant level probably did it a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Most people. I mean, if you come to SharePoint new and you do that, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some people doing that. But they've sort of painted themselves into a corner, really, because changing that switch means that you're either going to go all modern or you've got to do something to, sort of carve out your niches. The one thing that's important to note here, though, Todd, I'm going to note this. It's not going to switch any lists or libraries that have customizations that prevent them from going to modern. So there's stuff checked in the back, like if you have, and I don't know exactly what they are, but like if you customize the forms for a list, that can't go to modern because you've customized the forms. So it's going to be anything that's vanilla enough to go to the modern view.
Gotcha. That's good. And I was just thinking, this sounds like a job for PowerShell, like to walk through and inventory lists and libraries that have that, or if you wanted to force classic, PowerShell to walk through.
I wonder if anybody has PowerShell lying around that would do that.
That sounds impossible. I can't imagine anybody's.
Might be really hard. Right.
Yeah. So. But, and you talk about new customers. I've been noticing, the last year and a half, most of the migrations that I've done have been to new SharePoint users, customers that are using SharePoint new, and from file shares. And so for those folks, they just know modern, and that's all that it is. And so, they have not done that. And Drew in the chat room brought up, there is a modernization scanner. And Drew, if you want to throw that link in the chat room, I'll put it in the notes. There we go. So that would probably do it too.
Yeah, the post that Chris McNulty did, I think, people are always trying to read between the lines and find some tea leaves lying around, which is useful because, as you know, I'm a teapot. So this is not like some big disaster and Microsoft shoving something down our throats. That seems to be the classic response to these things. I think Chris has laid it out very clearly in that post. So you need to read all the words that he says and not panic.
Yeah. And I think, I'm a classic SharePoint guy. I've been using SharePoint forever and used to the classic lists and libraries. And I've made peace with the modern stuff. It's not that bad. It's different, but it's not bad.
But different is bad, right?
It can be.
Change is bad.
It can be. Change. I prefer bills over change, but but yeah, the modern lists and libraries. I think Microsoft has done a great job making the value of them worth the pain of switching to them and training and all of that.
Right.
So I've been a big fan of it. So yeah, whenever I talk to customers, regardless of what they're migrating from, I tell them, if at all possible, let's just start with modern, and that's good stuff. So that's one of them. Now, one of the things that modern sites have is this idea of site scripts and site designs. And you put a couple of things in the notes about those. Would you like to tell the folks about that?
Yeah. Well, and honestly, this isn't something I've spent a lot of time deciphering or figuring out, but it's the modern way to provision or deploy sites, right? You write a script that sort of declaratively says, this is the stuff that I want in this site. It's relatively new functionality. It's been around. How long has it been around? I don't know, 6 months?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, not forever. Anyway, it's to me, it makes a lot more sense than what used to happen with features and all that weird stuff.
Yes.
And so there's a great the ultimate guide to SharePoint site designs and site scripts from Laura Kokkarinen. I think I said that right, Kokkarinen.
Yes.
She's, Julie and I were talking about this morning. She's somebody who sort of, to me, came out of nowhere and is just like writing crazy good stuff and really useful content. So if you don't know Laura, I think, to me, these site scripts and stuff are, right up your alley.
Absolutely.
They're admin-like stuff.
Yep.
But they also have sort of a developer flavor to them too. I mean, I know you don't like to admit that writing PowerShell is coding, but
not,
and the site scripts are sort of the same way, right? So
yeah,
she has a great guide. It's very useful, and she's been updating it as things change. So if you are getting into this stuff, that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I think so. You and I have been around long enough in SharePoint to remember the days where we had site templates and site definitions, right. And for maximum confusion, the site definitions were stored in the templates directory. I mean, all this crazy, all that.
Microsoft isn't good with words.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I'm trying to explain that to the people. So there have always been a whole bunch of really bad ways to customize SharePoint. And I think they've finally... This is another one of those things that I chalk up to the fact that since Microsoft has to support SharePoint and host SharePoint, they're figuring a lot of these things out that guys like you and I have been screaming about for a decade. And I think the site scripts and the site designs is a great example of that. It's a great way to stamp out identical lists and libraries in a reproducible way, a predictable way. And so Laura's thing, that was one of the things that was blowing up my watch this morning. And I looked at that briefly. It looked really great stuff. But I didn't get a chance to read that very thoroughly. But one of the things that has always kept me from rolling out site designs and site scripts on big company-wide thing, because it matches a bunch of things that people want. But the only way you could manage it was with PowerShell. And there was no way for a site collection administrator to do anything with it without getting into PowerShell, which they totally have permission to do, but most of them are not comfortable with. So that kind of made this a no-starter. But back in December, the SharePoint team blog had a thing, here's some stuff that we're going to do. Here's the roadmap. And one of those things is we're going to put an interface for selecting site designs inside of the site collection. So somebody like myself can upload one or whatever, and it will show up in a picker, and people can pick it. And I just saw a couple days ago that has reached the targeted release ring of SharePoint Online. So if you're in the targeted release, you should now have that interface. So now site collection administrators can consume these things without having to break out PowerShell. And so when I saw Laura's thing, I saw this book, and I'm like, did she write this before or after that came out? And is she going to have to keep updating this? And
I know you notice underneath the picture she has a date as sort of like an last updated date, and she actually updated it today. I saw her say that on Twitter. So
excellent.
So I don't know exactly where in the update scheme it is, but that's pretty cool. For me, not as a developer, but from a user experience information architect side, we all have all these hats in the closet, right?
Yeah.
If I can roll out an information architecture using site scripts, then that makes me very happy, right? I mean, I'm very big on using content types and site columns and all that sort of stuff. And I believe, and again, this is where I need to get more familiar with this stuff. By rolling things out with the same GUIDs and all that sort of thing, you get the glue that makes your information architecture work well.
Yeah.
As opposed to using the content type hub.
Which was a great idea, and then it's like it's frozen in time. It's like Peter Pan. It will never age. It will always look exactly the same.
Well, and it's got a UI, so from that perspective, it's great for those end users who need to define information architecture and then publish it out. But it just doesn't work that well. It especially as we're moving from the pyramids to the flat stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
So I know I've got to dig into this. It sounds like you and I should do that at the same time, maybe.
Yeah, and in the chat room, Drew Madelung and Kyle have both posted some tools to help design the site designs, so I'm going to put those in the show notes. If you're listening to the podcast, you can go to toddclint.com/podcast418, and there'll be links to all the stuff that we're talking about, so you can, I don't need you swerving in traffic trying to write this stuff down as you're listening to the podcast, so just go out there to my blog and get those notes there. So yeah, you and I come from that thing from two totally different angles. I'm relying on folks like you to make these site designs and add columns and add metadata and do the thing, and then it's up to me to try to figure out a way to push that out so it's reproducible and doesn't kill the server and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'd be curious for us to sit down and revisit all that and see.
Yeah.
Because we've got a couple of customers in the pipeline here that are going to be doing new things and new installations, so it would be good for us to get up to speed on that and be able to give them some guidance.
And the other part of that whole sort of cycle is, somebody like me goes in and does stuff through the UI, and then we want to take that and turn it into a site design, right? So that's probably where I'd say, hey, Todd, help me.
Yeah, I'm doing a PowerShell talk this afternoon at a user group. So one of the listeners, Eric, has the Fox Valley SharePoint user group up in Wisconsin, and I'm doing a talk for them this afternoon, and it's on PowerShell. And I've adopted Julie's philosophy on presentations, conference presentations. I've got a folder that is a topic, and then I pull out the slides that I need for the thing. And I've noted I've got two slide decks in the PowerShell one. One is just PowerShell for Office 365, but I also have one that's PowerShell for site collection administrators. And that deck has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger because of some of these kind of things. I've got a site collection administrator who's done a thing and crafted a thing, and they want to reproduce it. How can they make a site design out of that? How can they do whatever? And that's becoming an option for them now. So that deck is getting bigger. I'm getting more slides, pulling more slides out of that. So
cool. So that was a little bit of a dig at me, where I store my slides based on event as opposed to topic.
Well, and I did the same thing. I done it by event, and so you and I were in the same camp, and so there's
and as usual, Julie had the better idea.
I think she might have. So for guys like Mark and I, we do the same talks or versions of the same talk over many years. So like the PowerShell with Office 365 one, I've done that a couple of dozen times over the last 3 or 4 years. And so when I get asked to do it, obviously I have to go open that deck up and change all the things that have been improved and all that. But then I have to mentally keep track of the last time I did that so that I can go to that event and then pull it out. And I'd mostly done a good job with that, but things fork. So Mark and I were talking about that in Teams a couple of months ago, and Julie's like, well, you guys are idiots. And we're like, well, yeah, I mean, whatever.
As she is wanted.
It's Thursday, of course. Yeah, whatever. And she told us the way she does it is she does it by topics. And then as she's asked to do a presentation, she goes and updates that topic. And then when the topic's updated, she pulls the slides out she needs for that presentation. But whenever she starts a new one, she always goes back to the topics folder. And I'm like, huh. I'll be damned. That's not a bad idea. So I started that a couple of months ago, and it's working out. I like the concept, so I'm trying that out. But the PowerShell one has been
a little organizational tip there.
Yeah. So I'm
success.
Yeah. So there's all the kind of stuff, and Lori put the notes in for the designer, so that's good. But yeah, so if you've been thinking about trying the site designs, make sure your tenant is in targeted release, or have a development tenant or something, and play with that and see if that's something that's good. So
definitely where things are going, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and in a much better way than we've ever had to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. Yeah. You added some crazy developer-y stuff at the end that I don't understand any bit of.
You skipped one, the Office 365 CLI.
Well, that's the next one. Yep. So jump into that one.
But it's not under my crazy good dev stuff, right?
That's true. That's true.
Oh. I think when I was on the podcast the last time I brought this up, because I think it's, to me, it's an alternative to PowerShell in a sense, right? It's a platform independent way to interact with the APIs, basically, that I interact with as a developer to get stuff done with Office 365. So I think it's worth taking a look. You can build yourself repeatable code there, and it keeps coming out. Waldeck MasterCars is the leader of that. I don't think he likes to take credit, but I think he does most of the work.
He's the name that I associate with it. I mean, he's always the guy putting stuff out.
Absolutely. He pretty much most of the stuff that's good that's going on in the world, he's got something to do with.
Got his little fingers in there.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a new release, so the link's there in the notes, and there's some new functionality. It keeps coming out with new stuff. The surface area gets bigger and bigger, so there's a lot you can do with it. And I use it as a developer when I want to do things like upgrade my SharePoint framework projects, because it helps you with that. So lots and lots of good stuff in there. Worth checking out.
Yeah, and I think so. The interesting thing about it is it's a cross-platformy thing, right. And that is just I PowerShell a lot. PowerShell is now open source, so PowerShell you can run on different devices, not just Windows anymore. But then your modules have to support it. So honestly, I just stick with Windows for everything. Yep. But one of the great things about the Office CLI is now you don't need a Windows box to do Office 365 command line-y things. Not a problem for me because I got Windows boxes coming out of my ears. But now, like I got a stack of Raspberry Pis here. I could install this on a Raspberry Pi, and or any kind of cloud environment that you've got, any sort of ephemeral, hosted Linux thing, that all works.
Box or something.
Yeah. And so I like that. It's a good thing as a administrator. The better command line tools that are out there, just the better my job is, and so I'm. Yeah,
I know that neither one of us has tried to do this, but if you took PowerShell and the Office 365 CLI and sort of, where are my hands, and compared them, they might it might do some things that PowerShell doesn't, or vice versa. So
yeah, and then that's one of the things. So when I think of that, I'm with you. I think of Waldeck being the guy that does that, and I just imagine, and this is, I wish I was this person, but Waldeck's got a list of things that he wants to do, and he writes the tool to do it. Instead of just using it himself after he writes the tool to do it, he publishes it in the Office 365 CLI. So those tools both grow in the direction of what the people who write them want to do, and so they get a little different corners.
He gets a lot of contributions from, it's open source, so he's contributions from all kinds of people. Yep. So we should give them credit too.
Yep. Yeah. I can't remember where I saw this, but it was a thing. If somebody would have said 30 years ago, I've got this great business idea. We're going to get all the smartest people that are experts in all these fields, and we're going to get them to work on our project for free in their free time. And if anybody would have said that out loud, they're like, "Are you crazy?" But look at Linux and all these other open source things, and
that's really the way it is. And if you look at what's going on just in P&P in general, which leads well into my crazy good dev stuff list. The code that's coming out from people like Waldeck and Irwin and Vesa runs that P&P effort. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's taking me forward leaps and bounds in the stuff that I build, and I'm not sure a lot of people know it's out there. So I think it's useful from an admin perspective. If you know people are using these open source libraries that are backed by Microsoft, as opposed to necessarily developed by Microsoft, then at least you know that they're using something that's sort of in the nice part of the gray zone, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things. So I've got this PowerShell thing, and a year ago, I forget. So I think it was at the last Sweden thing. I was talking to Erwin, and I had just been pitching the PNP to a customer because it was exactly the thing that they needed. They needed to do some stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, the PNP's got this thing. And the tech guy that I was working with, he was all on board, but like the CTO or somebody wouldn't do it because it wasn't from Microsoft. So they wouldn't use the PNP, they didn't trust it. And I made the mistake of saying that in front of Erwin. And this, I mean, this must be something that Erwin got every day about the PNP. And of course, Erwin loves the PNP, and he's got every reason to love it and be proud of it. And he went off. And Erwin's German, so the German language has got a lot of hard sounds and all that. And he started talking about how that was dumb and all the reasons why it was okay to use this. And that turned out to be a slide in my slide deck because I started feverishly writing everything down because he was just rapid fire. It was like an auto drive. As soon as I said that, I pulled the string and he went off. But yeah, it's absolutely sanctioned. Microsoft now signs the PNP with their own certificate. Yep. Which I mean, there's no higher level of trust than that. Vesa works at Microsoft. He's high up in Microsoft, and he's on board. I mean, it is a legitimate thing. I have no issues.
I've made some contributions, and when you watch how those contributions go through the process to actually make it into a release, it's impressive. I mean, it goes through a bunch of testing. It goes through some continuous integration steps that, this is probably a safer process than anything you're doing inside your organization, unless you're really good at what you do. So, even if I just submit a documentation change, one of them was, like this word spelled wrong. Yeah. It went through this process that didn't slow it down, but made sure that it was okay. Yeah. So that stuff is very solid and very safe, and it's really helpful. Yeah, that's the important part.
I've had many documentation things I've wanted to submit, and I've been intimidated by the Git process, the pulling and pushing and all the things. It sounds very physical, but I need to do that because there's been a couple of commandlets that my brain doesn't work the way that the person who wrote the documentation's brain does, and it took me a while to figure out how to use the commandlet because I just wasn't in it like they were. I can't believe I'm the only idiot out there, so I need to submit some of those things.
Well, we can probably work on that together. I could teach you something because GitHub is absolutely sideways or backwards. It took me a good year, which is embarrassing to say, but I say it to make everyone else feel better. Yeah. But it took me a good year to figure out what the hell pull and push meant, because to me it was not just backwards, it was sort of backwards to the side.
Yeah.
And now I started using WebStorm as my IDE, and for some reason the way it worked with GitHub just made it make sense to me. So I've stuck with WebStorm just because of that. So everybody sort of has to get that little bit of religion. It's a great way to manage content. Yeah. Code usually, but documentation as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to, and there's different tools that interface that I need to get in on that. And,
Yep.
And we had a question in the chat room. For those of us who are not, it's the whole curse of knowledge thing. The PNP that we're talking about is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices project on GitHub. You can go to github.com/SharePoint/PNP. The PNP has many tentacles. My favorite tentacle is the PowerShell commandlets, but there is other stuff that Mark's going to talk about here, but it's all under Patterns and Practices. The idea behind the Patterns and Practices was it's a project that Microsoft leads that shows non-Microsoft developers the best way to program against Microsoft things, the patterns and practices they should use when interacting with Microsoft products.
Yeah, I think it started out as something that came from Microsoft Consulting Services, and it really was patterns and practices. Like, take this approach. Yep. It's way beyond take this approach now. It's actual code that we as developers use in our solutions, and you would use the PowerShell, right?
I use it every day.
All the time, right?
Oh, yeah, every day.
So the name is actually sort of misleading because it's not just patterns and practices, which is sort of advice. It's code that you can use.
So much more than that now.
Yeah.
So what else is in there? So we kind of got off on a tangent. What PNP things have come out?
Well, I posted in Slack. There's a page that has all of those open source products or projects listed, which I suggested to Vesa on Twitter today that they figure out a way to make that more obvious. I didn't know that page existed until today, because there's good stuff, and if you can sort of scan that page, you might see more things than you knew were out there. So I use some stuff all the time, and this is more dev-based stuff. But you could talk about some of the other things on that page.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, thank you, sir. The PNP.js is. I don't say this just to like relive my old glories, but it's sort of like SP services for modern SharePoint. It's a fantastic library to simplify things like REST calls and just interacting with the APIs in SharePoint from a JavaScript perspective, but within your TypeScript solutions as well. So that is truly cool. And then if you are building SharePoint framework solutions, there are reusable React controls and reusable property pane controls. Some of them are very similar. So those are three things that I use now pretty much daily, because why write code if it's already been done, right? And you're using something that has been vetted, again, sanctioned by Microsoft. I think it's important to keep saying that.
Yep.
And for instance, there's a people picker in the React controls. You do not want to write a people picker.
I do not. No.
That is an awful thing. Yeah. That whoever came up with that concept and how it was built originally, but it does what you want it to do, right? And so there's a fantastic version of the people picker in there, and I've worked with them a little bit on making it act more like it needs to, and so. Great stuff in there. And then Stefan Bauer has the SharePoint framework Yeoman generator. So he's taking, the Yeoman generator that Microsoft does lets you start with Knockout or React, and he's built out one that will help you with Angular and other things. He's going really far with that. So I think the key is to go to that open source projects thing relatively regularly and just see what kind of stuff might be there that can help you out. There's the PowerShell commandlets that you were talking about and a bunch of other things. So it's not all just a developer audience.
Right. And I think that's an important thing for guys like me who aren't developers. When we have to write things, to get stuff done. What we never do, and I think what developers never do, is start in whatever our tool of choice is, file new, and have a blank page. Like, we all go somewhere and find something that's super duper close to the thing that we want to do. We start there and we just start wedging away, and I think a bunch of these projects take that a leap forward. So if I wanted to write a thing, which I will never do, but needs input from a user about what the person is, if I were just writing it without the benefit of these things, I would just have a text block, and I would hope that they pasted in the right thing, the right UPN or whatever, and then I would try to write things that caught the error, but I would do a poor job and it would all explode. But now I have this thing that I can just wedge in, and I can use this people picker, and I don't have to understand it or write it, but I can get to doing the thing that I want to do, which is write whatever functionality I want to use that username with. So these are great resources for developers and non-developers alike. It's good stuff. And Mark froze, where he's just sitting very still. Did you guys lose me? Let's bring this over here. Okay, so we lost Mark for a second. That's a picture of where Mark is at right now. I assume it's a boat on the coast of Greece or something like that. Yeah, so Mark lost me. I'm going to try to call him again.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, we lost. So one of the downsides you're going to notice now is you're not going to get my video.
That's all right.
Probably better off that way.
Yeah, probably fine.
So yeah, we'll probably try to cut that out. in editing.
My catamaran on the Ionian Sea.
Yeah, so when you
were that case,
when you went away, the background, the Windows spotlight thing was, So
yeah,
yes,
it was the dev filter, definitely.
Yep.
Too much of that.
Too much. So I think these tools, these package tools, are valuable for everybody, and I think it. Again, you and I have been doing the Microsoft thing for a while, and this is so antithetical to how Microsoft was 20 years ago, and it is so good. It is such a great development. Yeah,
it's like a whole different relationship that we as a community, whether we're MVPs or not, anybody can Dear Vesa on Twitter, but don't do that because he's got too much of it, and we're able to interact with the key people at Microsoft pretty easily, and get good stuff out of them. And this open source stuff is a great example.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. And I was talking to some non-Microsoft IT professionals last week, and we were talking about there's the thing with Microsoft stock and Apple stock, and there was a lot of discussion about that because they're big Apple fans. And they were talking about products and people's excitement about things. And they were saying that Microsoft had made some changes. And I'm like, it was all the antitrust lawsuit. Like that antitrust lawsuit is a huge black dividing line in Microsoft's corporate philosophy. And all the things that we love about Microsoft now, the Xbox and open source, all come from that point in time. When the government said, Microsoft, you're too big and you're too bad, we're splitting you up. And Microsoft went, ah. And I've read a couple of books about that, and it's interesting watching how that was just, and Bill Gates specifically, I was just floored about the impact that antitrust suit had on Bill Gates, the person, not just the guy, not just the CEO of the company, but the man himself. And it was interesting to read. So yeah, we can thank that. I was not a big fan of the antitrust suit. It's been 21 years now, so I don't remember all the specifics of it. But that ended up being a good thing, I think.
Yeah, definitely eye-opening for them about what being a monopoly in essence means.
I was most interested. One of the things that I find myself constantly thinking about in life is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know if you've studied that.
One of my favorite concepts, actually.
Yeah, so mine too. Like, so many things in life fit into that. And when you're at Bill Gates' level of success and ridiculous wealth, you're at that top part of Maslow's hierarchy, the self-actuation thing. And he's obviously not worried about shelter. He's not worried about food. His college for his kids is all covered. All those things that normal guys like you and I worry about, he's got covered. And there's just no way they will not be covered. And his concern at that point, at the peak of Maslow's hierarchy, is his legacy, like what the world. And I read one book about the antitrust thing that talked about how, before the antitrust thing, he was at the peak of that, and he was going to be remembered by history as the man who brought the PC to the masses. He made computers in every home. He was the guy that moved the computer revolution, that next step, so that every man could use it. And that was going to be his legacy, and that's what he wanted. And the antitrust suit, in his mind, took that all away from him. Now he was not going to be remembered that way anymore. Now he's going to be remembered as the guy that the government went after because he was bad and they had to break up his company. And it just devastated him. It devastated him in a way that just you can't even imagine. And that was one of the reasons why he didn't testify at any of the antitrust hearings, because he just couldn't keep his stuff together on the stand. He was so angry about that. And I've seen Bill Gates speak a couple of times, and obviously seen him 100 times on TV. And I don't know if you've seen him in person, but when he walked into the room, like, he controlled the room. Like, there was nothing going on that he didn't anticipate. I mean, it was just amazing watching him. And to think about that man, that guy that I had seen lose his stuff because he was just so angry about his legacy. And if you look back at the timeline, if you look at when the antitrust stuff started and when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation started, it's the same time. And it was all because of his legacy. It was because he realized the government had taken that one legacy. He's like, okay, I need something else. And so he basically got out of technology at that point. And as I read that, I'm like, that all fits together so incredibly well.
That's fascinating. You should slide some of those book titles into the notes, I'd be interested, and I think a couple other people said they would be as well.
Yeah, it was Brett, it was really interesting. And so they were talking about, in the one book that I read, neither Ballmer nor Gates testified at the antitrust thing. Ballmer, I think we all understand that. We've all seen the monkey boy and the developer. Like you understand that, right? He's just enthusiastic, and he's just. Right. Gates was always so measured and so in control of every situation he was in. I just could not imagine. But it shook him to the core that bad that he just could not. Wow, I never thought about that. But that's where we got all this open source stuff. That's it. All
interesting. Well, I also think that I'm not debating that that's true. I think that may have laid some foundation way back.
Sure.
But I also think that the One Microsoft initiative that actually was started by Ballmer, but then Satya took up and really has run with, that to me is when we started to see the impact. I mean, it's not that the changes were probably going on internally for a long time, but I think when Satya came into play, the ethos of the whole company really changed. And you and I, having gone out there to Seattle for the MVP Summit, we actually, I remember noticing it just walking down the hallway. People were different.
Yeah.
It happened very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the people at Microsoft were actually they were sort of squished underneath the culture that they didn't really feel comfortable in, and now they're able to do the things that they would have always wanted to do. I think they were discouraged from having social media accounts, for example.
Yeah.
And then look at what they're doing now. I mean, if you want to know something about what's going on in this community, they're all out there.
Yeah.
So things have changed a lot.
And I'm with you, because I think most of the people that I deal with at Microsoft are as excited about technology as we are.
Sure.
And they want to spread it. They want to, but I agree with you. 15 years ago, that was not encouraged, and it's that. And I love that old cartoon. I think it was an XKCD thing with the different company hierarchies, and the one from Microsoft was all the different business units with guns pointed at each other.
Yeah,
it very much felt that way. I mean, that was absolutely correct, and it was such a tight. I don't think it's that way anymore, and it's you can feel it. The people are able to work with their excitement and.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a very big company, and they have big company politics, and you and I run into that stuff too. But it seems like it's surmountable now. You talk to somebody like Dan Holm or Vesa, and they figure out how to navigate that company to get something done, as opposed to saying, well, we can't do that because so and so's angry at us. Which is the way it used to work.
We have run very long, so let's hit the community corner and the promotion stuff. You added a couple of things in there. Would you like to talk about the first thing in the community there?
I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with the Collab 365 community, but if you go to, I think it's collab365.org. Sorry, I'm just going to check. .com. Well, while that spins, they've done some virtual conferences in the past. The thing that I got to know them with first was a 24-hour round the world conference that they did. I don't know, probably 3-4 years ago.
Oh, I think it was longer than that. I think they did that. That was
Yeah, so it's actually collab365.community. Is their website. So they've been doing community-based stuff. A guy named Mark Jones runs this thing, and I mean, if you haven't dug into this community, there's all kinds of stuff in there, and microjobs is one of those things. And so under the sort of microjobs banner, and I'll let you figure out what's going on in all of this without talking about all the details, but they're going to start virtual conferences based around certain topics under the microjobs banner. So I saw Mark taking a poll of what to call things, and so they're sort of starting to think of revving that up, and it'll be a monthly thing with different topics every month. So you might want to keep an eye out for a topic that's relevant or interesting to you.
Yeah. One of the fun things, so they if you go to collab365.community, they have an aggregator of different blogs and things like that, and they've got my blog in there, and I've had to work with Mark a couple of times on taking the crappy RSS feed that SharePoint 2010 vomits out and sucking it into his thing so he can make heads or tails of it in his...
Right.
Yeah. And as I look now, I don't see my... I don't know if it's just, aged out, but I know it's been a source of much frustration for Mark, and I feel bad about that.
Oh, it's good that you're able to torture people from afar.
With my... swinging my SharePoint 2010 all over. Yeah, so I agree. Collab 365, they've been very active in the community for a lot of years, and they're good people. I like them. For events, kind of the same stuff we've had going on. You and I and Julie and the gang are going to be in Austin here in a month at SPTechCon, so you can get sptechcon.com and see all about that. I'm going to be doing a thing with Shane and another thing with Shane, and I forget what all stuff we're going to be doing. But go out there if you haven't signed up for that one. That's a good one. Nice little friendly conference in Austin. Be a nice break from the weather here in Iowa.
Good music, good barbecue.
Yep.
All that good stuff.
I will be in Kansas City on March 11th speaking at the user group down there. I think that's a Monday, and that's close enough. I'm going to drive down, and the user group thing is at noon. So if you're in the Kansas City area, want to hang out with me for lunch on Monday, March 11th, go ahead and head down there. I'll be doing that. And then a couple days later, I'm going to be going to Branson, Missouri for the North American Collaboration Summit. That is March 14th to the 15th, and Lori will be there, and I'll be there, and Shane will be there, and there'll be all kinds of crazy stuff there. Great conference. And then at the end of March, I'll be doing SharePoint Saturday in Omaha on March 30th, so you can sign up for that. I forget what I'm talking about there, but that's...
You're all over the Midwest, though, man.
Yes, March is a very busy month for me. Doing that, and then looks like we're going to maybe try to do the Sweden thing again this year. I was looking at my calendar. I'm like, I'm going to be in Omaha on March 30th.
Yeah, that's
Stockholm
tricky.
on April 1st.
Huh.
So that's the SharePoint Exchange Forum Joran Huseman puts on. Man, I look forward to my trips to Sweden all the time. What a great place. What a great country, great people, great community. Just can't get enough of that.
Yeah, if anybody is from anywhere near that part of the world, they really ought to sign up for that one. It's a great value too. It's not expensive compared to a lot of the big conferences.
And it's another one of those that is a cozy one. So there's you get a lot of attention from the speakers and the other people, and I love that one. Just getting to talk to folks. I'm a pretty friendly guy, so I like those small intimate ones because I can really chat with folks. And
it's where you and I go to talk to each other.
We do. We see each other in Sweden. It's a good time. And then the SharePoint conference in Vegas, May 21st through the 23rd. That's the big dog. There's a lot going on there. I know I'm doing an all-day session ahead of time. I think you and Julie are doing some stuff too.
I have one session. Julie's got 2 or maybe 3.
Excellent.
So yeah, we'll be there in force.
Excellent. Yeah, good times for that at the MGM Grand. And then you're going to be in Wiesbaden. Are you
Wiesbaden.
not?
Yeah. That conference, the European Collaboration Summit, follows right on the heels of the SharePoint conference, and it's in Germany. So it's not that it's the same thing that Microsoft does in Vegas, but I think a lot of the sessions, a lot of the speakers, we sort of go from the SharePoint conference over to Germany and deliver some of the same content, which sounds lazy, but it's actually a good thing because it's a totally different audience.
Yeah.
So that's a great conference. If you're in Europe, it's actually a community-based conference. Maybe it should be in the community corner. Don't know. Yeah. I don't know how to sort this stuff. Yeah. But anyway, it's cheap. I mean, if you're in Europe, I think I'm going to get it wrong, but it's not more than €100. I don't think. So it's world-class stuff for very little money.
Yeah, and it's the big dogs in the community over there. It's Otis and Tony and Spence and Fitz and all those guys are getting that.
And they let me stand in the corner, so.
Very nice, yeah. And I thought about that. That's one that I've never gone to. I'd like to do it. And if it weren't right on the heels of SharePoint conference, and if I didn't have so much other stuff going on, I might try that one. But I need to get to that one. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I'm sorry just to get the cost right, it's now up to €250 because it goes up as you get close to the organization or to the conference. But it's still a lot cheaper than any big conference.
Yeah, good value. Well, we have gone long, as often the case.
We're having so much fun.
Yeah, it's time flies. So thanks, everybody. Chat room, I'm going to stick around for a while, chat with you guys. But thanks for coming in, Mark. I'm kind of hoping that Shane's busy next week, maybe just between you and I. We don't need to tell him that.
Tell him there's something going on in that closet over there, right?
Yeah, we're hey, Shane, we're going to do the podcast on Thursday this week. Yeah. So if you want to show up Thursday morning, I might do that. But thanks for giving me an hour of your time today, Mark. I appreciate it.
You do it. Always fun to actually be able to chat with each other because we live far apart.
We do. And thanks everybody, and we will see you next week. And we're out.
Oh, sorry about dropping the internet. I think that was my end.
I think it was. I stayed on with the chat room, and they never lost to me. They only lost to you. But that's
I've had some Comcast problems, and I swapped out my modem with them a couple days ago. So I was hoping I'd solved it, but maybe not.
You're on the new laptop, right? You've got the new hardware, the new rig.
New hardware, new cable modem. So it's definitely better. I mean, I'm not having very many problems, and so, but we'll see.
All I know is, you're having internet problems. You swap out the cable modem. You swap out the computer. There's one common piece to all these problems, Mark.
It's the wire.
I don't know.
No, it's me.
Yes, it's near the chair. That's all I can say.
No, it sucks because I've actually had. Like I'll refresh Hootsuite or Twitter or something, right? And it'll tell me that the signal's gone or whatever, that message you get. And then like a half a second later, it just refreshes and shows up. So it's like the internet's going down for 10 seconds at a time.
Right.
It's not like it goes down because then I could call them and say it's busted. It's just sort of hiccups. But again, it's been better since I got this new modem, except for this one time. So yeah.
I had a problem when I moved in here. I got my internet was a similar thing, and I had a Raspberry Pi that was going out and pinging a known internet address, and then once every odd numbered minutes, so it wasn't like at the top of the hour, like every 37 minutes, it would go out and do a speed test, and it was recording all this into a spreadsheet. So when I called them, so the guy shows up and he's like, "Oh, I tested your line, everything's fine. I don't think you've got any problem." And we were standing in my basement where all that stuff is. So he's looking at the cable modem, and the Raspberry Pi sitting right next to him. I'm like, "You see that little box there?" And I tell him the story I just told him. I'm like, "So if you think there's no problems, I'd be happy to pull all those spreadsheets out and we can go through them. You and I, we can port through this." And of course, in there, there's like, I've got a 24 port switch with lots of lights, and I'm like. He could tell by looking at all that I wasn't like I'm like, if you want, I will pull the logs and we will, or you can maybe try a little more. Maybe run another test or two. Yeah, sure enough, the modem was bad.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like people who feel that they are a professional in what they do, cable guy could be one of those people. Sometimes when you demonstrate that you know more about something about what they do than they do, or at least know enough to have a sophisticated conversation, they almost like shut down. It's like, well, you're being a jerk.
And I probably was, and I don't know that I know more than he knows, but I certainly knew more than he expected that I knew. I thought I was just some dumb, I can't. I'm like, oh no, like I've been waiting for 45 days to have the information to come at you. I'm not.
When I was talking to, that wasn't me. When I was on Comcast, talking to Comcast on the phone, he started to do the whole. I mean, like he didn't go as basic as what color's the plug, but it was pretty close. And I'm like, dude, okay,
yeah.
I sit in this house all day long. I know exactly what's going on. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, there have been some of those times when I've called up and had problems, and I've done something dumb. I mean, it happens. I am not.
Yep.
I'm not.
Sure. Just because we think we know what we're doing doesn't mean we aren't idiots.
Yep. I'm a mess. But he's like, there's no problem. I'm like, okay. We will get to that. So, all right, I will let you go.
All right.
But thanks for filling in. Thanks. I will talk to you later. Chat room. I'll stay in the chat room, but I'm going to kill the stream. See you guys next week.
All right. Bye-bye.
got that. We will show his dealio there again, and then we will go offline. Bye, everybody.